بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. Last week we spoke about the surge of different groups of the Shia in the 4th century of the Hijrah, meaning in the 300s of Hijrah. And that corresponds to the 10th century of the Gregorian calendar, so the 900s after the birth of Isa alayhi salam. So around this period of time, many different groups of Shia, they emerged in the Muslim lands and they took power, they took control of the Muslim lands from all different directions. Baghdad, which was the capital of the Abbasid dynasty, it was taken over by a sect of the Shia known as Al-Buwayhiyin. And these people, they took control of Baghdad, which was the capital of the Abbasid Empire, but they didn't officially topple the Abbasid ruler, but they took control of the land. So they kept the Abbasid ruler in place, but they left him with no power, and they themselves were the ones who had control of the land. Also the Qaramitah, a very deviant group of Ismaili Shia, they had control of the eastern part of the Arabian Peninsula, Bahrain, and the eastern part of what is modern day Saudi Arabia, Al-Ahsa, and they also had control of Najd. And as for the Fatimiyin, they were another group from the Ismaili Shia. They had control of Egypt and they had control of Al-Maghrib Al-Arabi, the countries in northern Africa. So they had control of those lands, and they also took control of Sham as well, the Fatimis, right? So they were a deviant group of Ismaili Shi'as as well, and they were able to take control of all of these lands as well. And the Fatimis, after taking control of Egypt and Al-Maghrib Al-Arabi, and also taking control of Sham, they moved towards Al-Hijaz, which contains Makkah and Al-Madinah. And eventually they were also able to take over Makkah and Medina. Wal-iyadhu billah. Can you imagine this? The two holiest cities, Makkah and Al-Madinah, being under control of these deviant Ismaili Shias. So this was a very dark time in history when the Fatimid dynasty had control over these lands. Also in Yemen, a group known as As-Sulayhiyun, they were also Shia, and they allied themselves with Ad-Dawla Al-Fatimiyya. So they had control of Yemen. So you can see that the Shia, they became powerful throughout the lands, in the east and in the west and in the south. They had a lot of control over all of the land. So this is really a calamity that was taking place in the Muslim Ummah. And these deviant Shia, not only did they take political control of the land, but they tried to spread their ideology as well. And that's even more dangerous than having physical control of the land. What's more dangerous than that is them spreading their poisonous, evil ideology amongst the masses of the people. And that's what they were doing. That's what the Qaramitah and the Fatimiyun, that's what they were doing. So this was a very dangerous time in the Muslim Ummah. Now after some time, some conflicts arose between the Qaramitah and the Fatimiyun. The Qaramitah, they are a very deviant sect of Ismaili Shias. And the Fatimiyun, also a deviant sect, very deviant sect of Ismaili Shias. So basically their religious beliefs are similar, but some political differences arose amongst these two groups, between these two groups, and their relations started to sour. The Fatimiyun and the Qaramitah, they started fighting with each other, and this actually led to a number of wars that took place between the Qaramitah and the Fatimiyun. So now there's this inter-Shia fighting. They're fighting amongst themselves. Now in one of these wars, as we mentioned, the Fatimiyun, they had control of Hijaz, meaning they had Makkah and they had Medina. So in one of these wars between the Qaramitah and the Fatimiyun, the Qaramitah were able to force their way into Makkah. So the Qaramitah, they came into Makkah, they went to the Kaaba, they disrespected the Kaaba, and they actually stole the black stone. They stole Al-Hajar al-Aswad. They took it out from the corner of the Kaaba, and they stole it, and they took it to their headquarters in Al-Ahsa. Al-Ahsa is on the eastern part of the Arabian Peninsula, not too far from Bahrain. Right? So they took the black stone, they took it out from Mecca, from the Kaaba, and they took it to Al-Ahsa, and that's a place where they made a fake Kaaba. They built a fake Kaaba there in Al-Ahsa. And they thought that by bringing the real black stone to their fake Kaaba, that they would bring people in to make pilgrimage to their fake Kaaba instead of going to Mecca. Look at how deviant these people are. Look at the kufr, the disbelief in their ideology. These were the people who had control of those lands. Wal-iyadhu billah. So you can see it was a very dark time in the history of the Muslim Ummah. So they took the black stone, they took it to Al-Ahsa, where their fake Kaaba was, and the historians have mentioned that they had the black stone there in Al-Ahsa for a period of 22 years. So the black stone was not there at the Kaaba for a period of 22 years because of these deviant Qaramitah, Ismailiyya, Shia. They took the black stone and they took it to Al-Ihsa. For 22 years it was there, and they didn't return it until some negotiations were made through the Fatimi ruler, a man named Al-Aziz Billah. He was the ruler of the Fatimid dynasty at that time. He negotiated with the Qaramitah to return the black stone back to Mecca. So eventually the Qaramitah, they realized that they had failed in their objective. Why did they take the black stone to Al-Ihsa in the first place? Because they thought that by bringing the black stone to their fake Kaaba, people would come and make pilgrimage to Al-Ihsa instead of Mecca. But that never happened. It didn't work. Right? So they realized that they failed in this objective to bring people to their fake Kaaba. So they finally agreed and they returned the black stone back to Mecca. But they didn't return it intact. They didn't return it in one piece. They broke it into pieces. They broke the black stone into pieces. And later on, these pieces of the broken black stone, they were placed into a mold of onyx stone. Right? They were placed into a mold of onyx stone to keep the pieces together. Right? And that is what you see today. If you ever go for Umrah, and if you have the opportunity to go and kiss the black stone, now look at the black stone. You will see that it is multiple fractured pieces that are all kind of kept together in one mold. But you can actually see the pieces of the black stone that are there. Right? And the reason for this, the reason why it's broken up like this is because the Qaramitah, they broke the black stone before returning it to Mecca. So you can see the effects of their evil even until today. You can see the effects of what they did. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give these evildoers what they deserve. So this conflict arose between the Qaramitah and the Fatimiyun. They're both deviant sects of Ismaili Shias, but now they're fighting amongst each other. But even amongst the Qaramitah and the Fatimiyin, the ones who are more deviant, they're both deviant, both evil. But the Qaramitah were more deviant, even more deviant than the Fatimiyin. They had even more evil ideologies and beliefs than the Fatimiyin, even though both of them were evil and deviant. That's why if you look at the works of Ibn Kathir, rahimahullah, when he narrates the history and he talks about the wars that took place between the Qaramitah and the Fatimiyin, in some of these wars, in some of these battles, the Fatimiyin were victorious against the Qaramitah. So Ibn Kathir would be happy that, okay, in this battle, the Fatimiyun, they were victorious over the Qaramitah. So he would be happy that the Qaramitah were defeated. Even though the Fatimiyun, they were also very evil. But the evil of the Qaramitah was even greater than the evil of the Fatimiyun. Right? So when two evil forces are fighting with each other, when the more evil one is defeated, then this is better than the more evil one being victorious. So Ibn Kathir, he would narrate it in such a way, right? Alright, so this infighting happened between the Ismaili Shias, between the Qaramitah and the Fatimiyun. When the leader of the Qaramitah at this time, a man named Yusuf ibn Hassan al-Jinabi, when he died, and he was the leader of the Qaramitah, when he died, the rule of the Qaramitah, it went to a group of 5 elders. 5 elders from the Qaramitah. The rule, it went to them. And when the rule went to 5 people, of course, rule, when it is divided amongst many people, when it's not only one king but many kings in one kingdom, then you can expect that things are not going to go smoothly. Right? If this person doesn't agree with this person, then there's going to be a conflict and the rule will not go smoothly. That's even if there's only 2 people. So imagine if there's 5 people. So when the rule was transferred to these 5 men, that is when the Qaramitah empire, it started to become weaker. It started to become weaker and it started to diminish until they lost all of their lands. Except for Al-Ihsa, they still had that, and they had Bahrain. So these parts in the eastern part of the Arabian Peninsula, they still were able to hold on to a few pieces of land, but their influence became much weaker. As for the Fatimis, they had a strong grasp on Misr, on Egypt. Their rule in Egypt was strong, but they had difficulty holding on to Sham. They had rule over Sham as well, technically, right? Officially, they were the rulers of Sham as well. But in reality, they were having a very hard time keeping control of Sham. And basically every major city in Sham tried to gain independence and break off from the Fatimi umbrella. They tried to distance themselves and they tried to make themselves independent from the Fatimi empire, right? So Hims basically became its own state, right? Its own mini-state. Halab actually became its own mini-state. Damascus, it became its own mini-state, right? So because none of them want to be under the rule of the Fatimids, so they basically declared their independence from the Fatimid dynasty. So every major city basically became its own mini-country. So you can see the Fatimids, they're struggling, they're having a hard time keeping control of Sham. In the year 996, after Isa alayhi salam in the Gregorian calendar, which corresponds to 386 after the Hijrah, a new ruler came into power over the Fatimids. A new Fatimi ruler came into power, and this was a man whose name was Al-Hakim bi Amrillah. That was his name, Al-Hakim bi Amrillah. But the historians, even though this man's name was Al-Hakim bi Amrillah, the historians used to refer to him as Al-Majnoon, the crazy man, right? Because when he became the ruler, he instituted some crazy rules and policies over the people. One of the things, for example, there are many things, but one example, one of the things that he did is he canceled work in the day. Like nobody should work in the day. Everybody should work in the night only. Right? The night is for working and the day is for sleeping. Right? So he switched things around. Right? Crazy. Right? This is one of the things that he did, and many other crazy things as well, such to the extent that historians later on started to call him Al-Majnoon, the crazy man. Now during the reign of this man, Al-Hakim bi Amrillah, a huge earthquake struck Al-Quds. Jerusalem was affected by a big earthquake, and Qubbatul Sakhra, the Dome of the Rock Masjid, a couple of sides of it actually collapsed, fell down because of the earthquake. So after that earthquake, a few years later, the son of Al-Hakim bi Amrillah, his name was Zahir. So Zahir, he basically restored Qubbatul Sakhra. He rebuilt those broken parts of the Dome of the Rock Masjid in Jerusalem, and he actually adorned the masjid, and he decorated it very beautifully, very exquisitely. So even today, if you go to Jerusalem, if you visit the Dome of the Rock, Qubbatul Sakhra, a lot of that exquisite work that was done around it, a lot of the beautification and the adornment and the design around it, that was done by the Fatimids after that earthquake, right? Also, from amongst the things that Al-Hakim bi Amrillah and his son Zahir, amongst the things that they did in Jerusalem was that they destroyed the Church of Holy Sepulchre. And that's the church that's considered the holiest site in Christianity. The Church of Holy Sepulchre, right? So this church is considered the most holy site by the Christians, and it has been. for, centuries. But without any reason, this man, Al-Hakim bi Amrillah, and his son, they went and they destroyed that church. They destroyed that church. And of course, this made the Christians very angry. Like, what did they do that for? Why did they destroy the church? The church was standing there for so many years, right? The Muslims before this, they never tore down that church. Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh, he didn't destroy that church when he conquered Jerusalem, right? But now this man, Al-Hakim bi Amrillah, for no reason, he just goes ahead and he destroys the church in Jerusalem, right? So this is something that made the Christians very angry. Not only the Christians there in Palestine and Jerusalem, but the Christians in Europe, they heard of this as well, that this man, he destroyed the Church of Holy Sepulchre, and because of this, they became very, very angry. So this actually set the stage. This is one of the events that set the stage for the Christian Crusades that would happen some years later, right? This is one of the events that set the stage for that. All right, in the year 411 of the Hijrah, this Fatimi ruler, Al-Majnoon, Al-Hakim bi Amrillah, he died. And after he died, then the Fatimi dynasty started to spiral downward as well. And the Egyptian economy became very bad. And the real rule of the Fatimid dynasty from that point, it went to the ministers of the state, the wuzara. So the Khalifa of the Fatimid dynasty, he would still be there in name, right? It would go from son to son to son. It would go, as a monarchy in lineage. So they would still hold the official power. They would hold power by name. But the real power, the ones who were actually making all of the decisions, were the wuzara, the ministers of the state, right? And this was specifically or particularly the case during the rule of the Fatimi ruler, Al-Mustansir Billah, right? He was one of the Khalifas of the Fatimid dynasty, a man named Al-Mustansir Billah, and his rule started in the year 472 of the Hijrah, which corresponds to the year 1036 of the Gregorian calendar. So his rule started in the year 472 or 1036 in the Gregorian calendar. And he was the ruler of the Fatimid dynasty for how long? For 60 years. He sat on the throne of the Fatimid dynasty for 60 years. Right? That's a long time to be king. So he was the king for 60 years, but during that 60 years, he really didn't have any power. Right? All of the power was actually had in the hands of the ministers of the wuzara, the ministers of the state. All right, but officially, the rule, it goes from father to son. And the ministers, they know that they can't officially change that, because if they officially try to change that, then there would be an uprising by the people. Right? Because remember, who are these people? What is their belief? They are Shi'i Ismailis, and they believe that their ruler has a position of holiness. So you can't just remove the ruler like that. So the wuzara, they were very smart. They didn't remove the rulers officially. They kept them on the seat, but they had no power. And the ministers were the ones who actually handled all of the affairs. So Al-Mustansir Billah, this Fatimid ruler who sat on the throne for 60 years without having any real power. When he became old and his time, he realized that his time to leave this world was coming up, he had two sons, or two main sons. One of his oldest son was Nazar, a man named Nazar, and his younger son was a man named Al-Musta'li. So Nazar and Al-Musta'li. Now, the way that it would usually work in the Fatimid dynasty was that rule would be transferred from the father to the oldest son. It would be transferred from the father to the oldest son, right? So the older son was Nazar. So technically, according to their system, he would be the next ruler. But Al-Mustansir Billah, the father, he didn't want to give the rule to his oldest son. He didn't want to give it to Nazar. He wanted to give it to the younger son. He wanted to give it to Al-Musta'li, right? So after Al-Mustansir Billah died, then there was a big fight between the two brothers, and each brother had their own supporters. Nazar had his own supporters, and his claim was that I'm the older son, I have the right to rule. And the other son, Al-Musta'li, he said, well, my father, he specifically said that he wants me to rule, so I have the right to rule. So this was the claim that both of them had, and because of that, each side had their own supporters, and the two brothers fought against each other. So there was a lot of internal fighting going on within the Fatimid dynasty at this time. Now, while all of these things were happening in the east, there were things happening in the west as well. When we say the west, we're talking about Europe, right? There were things happening in the west as well. Bani Umayyah, remember we talked about Bani Umayyah many weeks ago. Bani Umayyah, even though they didn't have control in the east anymore, they did have control of Andalus. Bani Umayyah, they had control of Andalus, Spain, since the year 756 of the Gregorian calendar. But then in the year 1031 of the Gregorian calendar, they lost Andalus. So they had Andalus. Bani Umayyah had Andalus under Muslim rule for a period of 275 years. They had it for 275 years, but then they lost it in the year 1031 of the Gregorian calendar. So when they lost Andalus, when Andalus fell, it was divided into 22 separate states, 22 independent states, right? So imagine this, Bani Umayyah had Andalus under control as one land, but when they lost control of it, it was divided into 22 independent separate states. Now, around this same period of time, when Bani Umayyah lost Andalus, around the same period of time, back in the east, the Seljuks, As-Salajiqa, they started to gain power and prominence. They were Turks, right? And when we say Turks, we don't mean from what is modern day Turkey. We mean people who are from Turkmenistan, right? So they were ethnic Turks, and they were very religious Sunni Muslims, alhamdulillah. They were pious Sunni Muslims, right? And they were able to gain control of Iran and Iraq and the Caucasus as well. The Caucasus, it's southern Russia, Georgia, Azerbaijan, these areas. So the Seljuks were able to take over these lands, and eventually they were able to reach Baghdad. But they didn't overthrow the Abbasid dynasty either. They allowed the Abbasid Khalifa to remain in place, but by this time he was basically Khalifa only in name. It was just a formality. But the Seljuks were the ones who actually had political power, right? So they started gaining prominence around this time as well. And alhamdulillah, this is something that is good, because when they started to gain prominence, they were able to take power away from the Shia, from the Fatimids, right? So the rise of the Seljuks was something that was very good for the Muslim Ummah. All right. Now in Europe, around the same period of time, there were some huge political issues going on amongst the Christians as well. The Christians in Europe, they split into the Eastern Orthodox Christians and the Western Roman Catholics. So the East and the West, they split from each other as well. So the Christians were having some infighting as well. All right, then in the year 1057 of the Gregorian calendar, Ferdinand, who was the king of Leon, and that's in modern day Spain. It's one of the parts of modern day Spain. Remember, Andalus, it was a big land, but when it fell, when the Muslims lost control of it, it was divided into 22 separate states. So from amongst these states was the land of Leon, and Ferdinand, he was the king of Leon. So in the year 1057, Ferdinand, he wanted to take Andalus back. He wanted to take the whole Andalus back and bring it back under Christian rule, right? So he declared that he wants to start a war in order to reunite Andalus, but under Christian rule, right? So this was basically a precursor to the Crusades as well. Before the Crusades of the East, this was theoretically a crusade in the West that took place to take back Andalus. All right. Some years later, in the year 1067, the wazir of the Fatimid dynasty at this time was a man named Badr al-Jimali. So he was the powerful figure in the Fatimid dynasty at this time, the wazir, the main wazir. Badr al-Jimali, he sent a troop of Turk soldiers to Palestine, right? So the Fatimids, they had a number of Turk soldiers in their military. So he sent a troop of Turk soldiers to Palestine, to Jerusalem, because there were some uprisings that were happening there in Palestine. Some of the Bedouins, they were rising against the Fatimid dynasty. They were rising against the Fatimid dynasty. So to quell this, the Fatimi wazir, Badr al-Jimali, he sent a troop of Turk soldiers to Palestine. So this Turk troop, they reached Palestine and they were able to take control of the situation. They were able to quell the uprising of these Bedouins. But then they did something that surprised the Fatimis. So they were actually part of the Fatimi military. But once they reached Palestine, they declared themselves independent from the Fatimid dynasty, these soldiers. They said, we don't want to be part of the Fatimi dynasty anymore, and we declare our allegiance now to the Seljuks, to Salajiqa, the Sunni Seljuk Empire. And the reason for this, according to many historians, was because these soldiers, they were Turkmen, they were Turks. And the Salajiqa, the Seljuks, they were Turks as well. So they thought, okay, look, these guys are Turks, we're Turks, let's align with them. So they aligned with the Seljuk Empire, right? And after this, the Seljuks were able to take control of Quds. The Seljuks took control of Jerusalem, walhamdulillah, right? So now, alhamdulillah, the Seljuk influence and the Seljuk Empire, it is expanding in a good way, alhamdulillah. And with the expansion of the Seljuk Empire, the Shia Ismailiyah, they're getting weaker and weaker and weaker. So alhamdulillah, things are looking good. Things were going forward in a good way, alhamdulillah. Then in the year 1071, the Seljuk Sultan, a great man, a great leader, and a great military commander, Alp Arsalan, rahimahullah, he and his forces fought against the forces of the Byzantine Empire in a historical battle, one of the greatest and one of the most important battles in history. It was the Battle of Malazkart. And this battle was fought between Alp Arsalan and the Seljuks against Romanus Diogenes, who was the emperor himself of the Byzantine Empire. He himself, the emperor himself, came to command the army. That's how important this war was, right? Because whoever wins this war gets access to Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey. And this is very strategic, right? So if Alp Arsalan is able to win this battle, he will take Anatolia. And if he loses this battle, then the door of Anatolia will remain closed for the Muslims. So very, very important battle with a lot at stake between Alp Arsalan and Roman Diogenes, the Byzantine Empire. And alhamdulillah, Alp Arsalan, he was victorious in this battle in the year 1071, and this opened the door for the Muslims to enter into modern-day Turkey, to enter into Anatolia. And this actually, later on, this paved the way for the Ottoman Empire as well. And the Ottoman Empire, alhamdulillah, lasted for many centuries and they spread throughout the world, alhamdulillah. This was the first step towards that, getting into the doors of Anatolia. And this happened with the victory of Alp Arsalan at Malazkart in the year 1071, right? So with all of these things happening, and the Christians being defeated by the Muslims, and the Christians feeling that the Muslims are taking over so many lands, right? This brewed the desire in the Christians to try to take back these lands from the Muslims. And this is what eventually led to the Crusades. So inshallah we'll stop there for today, bi'idhnillah, and inshallah next week we will continue with the history of the Holy Land بإذن بارك الله فيكم والله أعلم وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. الله يبارك فيكم.